Hey everyone, what's up? It's your favorite Lily of the Field, aka Yeshua's epiest soldier. And yeah, today I wanna talk about um the book The Right to Be Lazy by the um Cuban, Haitian slash French and Spanish um politician slash socialist Paul Lafargue. And I want to talk about it because most of the videos that I've seen about it don't really talk about the contents of the actual pamphlet. Like, they seem to just give you general, like, rundowns of what it is, but at the most basic level. Sometimes I think people are just reading from Wikipedia too. So I kind of wanted to give a deeper interpretation of it, so that it might help others. And I also wanted to, tackle the question which is sort of addressed in the book: do we have the right to be lazy? And yeah, starting off, a little bit about Paul Lafargue. Paul Lafargue was um an early socialist. He actually married Marx's daughter Laura. But he was of Cuban Haitian um and he was a mestizo slash métis. I think that's how you pronounce it in French. Kind of like your boy. So like he was of European, African, and indigenous descent. Um, I think though he was mostly like French Gentile and French Jewish alongside African and supposedly Taino. Um, but yeah, and his dad actually, interestingly, was a mestizo plantation owner, which I'm not gonna say that was rare because I think that would be unfair, but it was pretty uncommon. Usually, plantation owners were like, you know, pure blooded Spaniards or French people. Um, so that's interesting, and so that allowed him to get a really good education in Cuba, um, initially, because that's where he was born. He was born in Santiago de Cuba. Um, and then also later France. And I'm not gonna go into like how he met Marx and then his daughter and stuff like that, but yeah, just know that he was instrumental in the development of both French and Spanish socialism in the mid to late 19th century, and he even wrote into the early 20th century. Um, and so, yeah, he published The Right to Be Lazy in 1883 uh, in French. Um, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce its French title. I know that in Spanish it's called El Derecho a la Pereza. And usually a word like pereza is translated as laziness, but a more literal one would sort of be like sloth, as in like one of the deadly sins. Anyway, And yeah, basically it takes um the experiences of French, specifically Alsatian. Bro, it seems like everything happens in Alsace, man. Freaking John Calvin, he was from there, wasn't he? And like, the Dreyfus affair and stuff like that. uh but yeah, anyway, so I mean, but that kind of makes sense because that region was like, and I think maybe still is like France's industrial heartland. Although I think France also kind of deindustrialized. Anyway, so yeah, and the first part of the book, guys, is kind of like, um, you know, at least in an American context, what you sort of learn about as the basics of like the Gilded Age in school and like all those journalistic exposés that led to um more labor regulations. Like I think Upton Sinclair, a book, The Jungle. I haven't read it completely yet, but that's one that always gets pointed out. The first part of The Right to Be Lazy is kind of like that. It basically just exposes the the labor violations, essentially the horrible treatment of female textile workers by Alsatian capitalists. um and then the second part sort of mm, uses this as a jumping off point to argue, well, like, this is why rest is necessary, right? Like, and he sort of makes these grand allusions to like the Bible. Like, he mentions the lily of the field, which is part of the Sermon on the Mount, right? How they neither toil nor worry. And he interestingly recast that as um a call to be lazy, a call to rest, which I never really thought about it that way. Like, he's essentially saying that it's saying that you should like take the Sabbath, Shabbat, seriously, and like that's what Yeshua Jesus was getting at. And like when I first read that, I was like, whoa, I had never considered that. But he's kind of right, like, because the lily doesn't move. And the lily, stays in its place and everything else takes care of itself. Um, but, excuse me, another thing too that I really like about it is that he, like, mentions Greek mythology and like he mentions the Bacchae, right? The disciples of Dionysus slash Bacchus, and he's like, where have those ladies gone? The ones that dance and uh like to have fun and all of that stuff. And you know Euripides is goaded, so I like that. But yeah, and later on he also um mentions like the reason we have a lot of breakthroughs and good things often comes from leisure time, from rest time, when we're not even necessarily focused on our jobs and stuff like that. And I can't, that's actually a pretty good argument, man, because like think about it. If you're spending all your day working, um just to put food on the table, and I'm not even talking about right now, right? We have labor laws in most of the developed West. We'll see about that in the US with you know who in charge. We'll see, guys. We'll see. Hopefully, you know. But the situation of the garment workers in Alsace was extremely different, guys. They were like working like 14-hour days and stuff like that, and it's not like our 8 hour, or if you live in France now, I think it's around 7 hours, isn't it, a day. And yeah, man, what else can you do? Like, what else do you have time for except brothers and sisters? They would barely even give them breaks for lunch. Um, they were literally working them to the point of being unalived. um, and so yeah, I can't help but think that in this case, he's right. And he also mentions the fact that the leisure class depended on servitude. I can't use the other word. And if you're an American, you know very well that that was the case for the South. I'm a Southerner, and if you're from the South, you know very well that's the case. Or maybe not, because they say that's DEI, which is, we all know what that's really trying to say. Um, but yeah, and he's also right, because honestly, guys, even Aristotle in the Politics, I think it's at the end of the first part of book Alpha. He's like, yeah, the reason why the Egyptians, which keep in mind that was like one of the most advanced civilizations at that time. You look at early um Greek art before the classical period, it's basically just like, hey yo bro, let me copy your homework but change it a little bit. But he said the reason why the Egyptians were able to advance so much is because they had a large underclass doing the manual labor work that no one else really wanted to do. And so the people higher up in the hierarchy were able to like pursue math, pursue geometry, pursue art and culture. And you see a sort of similar thing repeated in Greece and Rome itself as well, especially in Rome, guys. Like, and this is something I remember from my Latin teacher. Most um Roman put like the higher classes, the patrician class, had educated Greek servants that educated their families in Greek philosophy and culture and art and math and stuff like that, and most upper class Romans were bilingual in Greek and Latin precisely because they used servant labor and were able to create these wonderful works of literature and art, you know, due in large part to being freed from the type of manual labor that you would see um happening among the lower classes later on in the industrial age. And what's interesting too is that I think this might be the origin, don't quote me on that, um, of the claim that medieval peasants got 150 days of holidays, which I think is technically true, right? But what they and he acknowledges in this in the book, yeah, they weren't technically free, they were serfs, they were tied to the land, but at least they got a lot of leisure time, and they weren't being pushed to the brink like in, the early industrial age slash, I forget, would 1883, that would, yeah, I'm fairly certain that would put it right in the, you know, midst of the second industrial revolution. And so, yeah, once again, it's kind of hard to argue with that. Um, and the final thing he sort of talks about, and again, go read the book for yourself. I'll leave a link to it. Is that the upper classes are kind of hypocritical, right? They enjoy all the things they tell the lower classes, like, oh, don't worry about this, guys, trust me, like, you don't want, this is evil, like, and then you come to find out that um they are doing the exact same things. They gaslight their the lower classes into thinking is bad. As one recent example that comes to mind for me is like when Trump and Elon Musk claimed to, care about American workers and stuff like that, but yet they support H-1B visas. Now, let me be clear, but guys, I'm an immigrant. I support H-1B visas. Um, but it is hypocritical for them to, go out and preach against that, but yet at the same time, support a program like that that would allow them to basically import even higher skilled labor than the lower skilled labor they already do. And guess what, bro? That stuff is filled by people from my ethnicity, Latinos. My parents were those types of workers, guys, or are those types of workers still in a lot of cases. So, you know, yeah, that's just a recent example. But yeah, all the time, billionaires will get caught up in hypocritical scandals and stuff like that. So, yeah, man. Um, that's basically the things that the book talks about. And, he basically uses these 3 points, even though there are 4 chapters, like, those 3 points are basically what the book is about. And to say, like, yeah, man, let people have the right to be lazy so that culture will flourish and that people will have time to pursue artistic things because it's better for society as a whole if it is that way. And he actually thinks that people should only work about 3 to 4 hours a day, which, I mean, to be honest, that's a based take. Like, because the thing is, and he sort of mentions this, but it's like, bro, with so much advanced technology, why are we working more and more and more and more? And why are we letting, like, billionaires trick us into thinking, oh, trust me, bro, you'll get there one day. Trust me. You know what I mean? Instead of saying like, man, I wanna have a family, dog. I wanna like go out and be like the lilies and see the lilies and the flowers and the like, frolic with my friends and stuff like that, bro. Like I want to enjoy Shabbat. um and yeah. Now at the same time, a part of me, and like, you know, maybe this is the Protestant work ethic and its consequences being a disaster for the human race. But yeah, man, I don't know. Like, as someone who has had to work hard primarily because I've already talked about how the system prevents me from working a traditional job, but I've still had some level of academic achievement. Like, I still think the Protestant work ethic, this sort of pick yourself up by your bootstraps sort of mentality, is still kind of useful. Like, I kind of like it in certain limited circumstances. Like, for example, my master's degree, guys, I pulled all nighters to get that thing, man, and it's like I'll never forget having so much reading that I had to go to bed at this time. I have Philips Hue lights where I can turn them on and off with my phone if I ever need to do something like that again, and I did need to various times, but at this point I didn't have anything like that. So what I would have to do is I would have to go in bed and with my the flashlight on my phone shine the light on the book while I read it. Um and yeah, man, did I push myself? Was it exhausting? Yes, but it's worth it. And there's something to be said about like at least sometimes pushing past your limits to, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, does that mean I agree with the Protestant work ethic? Of course not. You shouldn't make that an ideology, which is what the United States and Canada, aka Anglo America, has done. I would much more preferably be siesta pilled, guys. I just would like I'm also Spanish, man. Like there you can't take that away from me. But I'm not gonna lie and say that like you know those all nighters and the sleep that I had, bro. The sleep that I had on winter break of my first year of graduate school was unlike any other sleep I've had in my entire life. It was some of the best sleep I had in my just like ever. And that wouldn't have been possible without the Protestant work ethic, without not resting. And so like yeah, I mean I like to call that um I guess like the Dark Souls dilemma because it's like, you know, in Dark Souls, yeah, it's hard, but the joy comes from the challenge, from grinding, from learning patterns and weapon loadouts. And, but it's a fine balance because you don't want your player to get exhausted and like that. Um, you don't want the pick yourself up by your bootstraps ideology, the Protestant work ethic myth, essentially baked into the nation state to become your all, because that's also dangerous. We need rest. It's kind of like cats can have a little bit of salami. In that same way, you can have a little bit of national mythology as a treat, just enough to keep you going. um so yeah, guys, that's my review and exploration of The Right to Be Lazy by Paul Lafargue. Thank you very much. Bye.